Hey, how's it going everyone? Welcome to Asian Filmist. My name is Ray and I love movies. And the movie we'll be talking about today is a 2002 Korean horror film, Phone, directed by Ahn Byeong-ki and starring Jiwon, one of my favorite Korean actresses. And obviously if you follow this channel long enough, I don't usually talk about Korean movies, but I do watch Korean movies too. Other than Japanese, I like to watch movies from all over Asia. So today, with Halloween approaching, I wanted to talk about some of the older films that I enjoyed watching when I first started getting into Asian cinema. And one of those films was Phone. I watched it around the time the Asian horror hype started to peak up, with movies like The Ring and The Grudge. Phone was definitely one of the movies I checked out when the fever was high. I remember when I first watched The Phone, I genuinely enjoyed it, but then again, there are a lot of movies out there that we can only remember with good memories because of nostalgia. So, when we watch them again, it's not every case which they always hold up to our memories. So I wanted to see if Phone held up to mine. And so the story of Phone, how it goes, it follows the character of Jiwon, who's played by Jiwon. She's a journalist who's particularly known for publishing scandalous articles. And it got to the point where she would receive phone calls from some of these people she would expose. It got so bad to the point that she had to change her phone number and she had to move. And one of her good friends offered her a place in their unused house, which is currently being renovated. She has some rich friends. But then as soon as she changes her phone number, she starts getting these weird anonymous phone calls. At first, in her old phone number, these were phone calls from people who were threatening her with calls like, how dare you, I know where you live. These are people who are targeting her because of her articles. But now with this new phone number, these are, we don't know who these calls are from. They're just kind of static noise. You might hear some voices in the background, but it's all eerie and mysterious. And it starts getting really weird when Youngju, the daughter of the friend, answers one of these anonymous phone calls. Then she starts freaking out, and from that point on, she starts taking on this really weird personality. Like, she seems to be attractive towards her dad in a sexual way. It's really strange and eerie. And thus begins Jiwon's journey to kind of unravel the mystery behind these phone calls. So that's the basic story. Now let's talk about the positives and negatives in which I felt were in Phone. And let's start with the positives. The positives, well, to be honest, there's not much to say. I mean, going back and watching it, I thought some of the visual effects are really cool. Jiwon, as usual, gives a good performance in pretty much any movie she's in, no matter what kind of movie it is. You can always count on Jiwon to deliver in performing the character in which that was written for her. And as far as the positives to go, that's pretty much it. So let's dive into the negatives. And just a bit of fair warning to talk about some of the things I had beef with. I'm gonna dive into some spoiler territory. So this is your warning right here. I mean, it's an older movie. If you haven't seen the movie yet, I apologize. But I know a bunch of you have probably seen Phone. So I want to mention that there will be a few spoilers. So watching Phone again, it didn't exactly, obviously live up to the fond memories I've had of it. I guess after watching so many movies from the point in which I watched Phone, you just have a different viewpoint on how a good movie should be. And at the time I thought Phone was great. It scared the bejesus out of me back when it came out. Watch it again, it's, granted, I knew when all the scares will come, but at the same time, I start to notice a bunch of the other things that really bothered me other than the predictable scares. One of the things that bugged me the most was that there were a lot of loose ends. I mean, there are a lot of things that you would think relate to the story are kind of just dropped in there, but not really mentioned again as the story goes on. For example, you get introduced to Jiwon as a journalist, and for the first 20 minutes or so, you can see how her profession has affected her life and how it gets the story rolling. However, after we get into the nitty-gritty of the story, you kind of forget that she's a journalist, and they don't really go back to it. They don't really use that skill set of her characters to really progress the story at all. It was just there just to get the initial story started. And Jiwon has a detective friend that helps her evade whoever is sending her threatening phone calls. And in the story, something happens to him, and then Afterwards, Jiwon doesn't really acknowledge the detective ever again, even though he played such an important role seemingly in her story. But after this thing happens to him, she doesn't even keep him in his thoughts. And that also goes for the stalker. There's this one stalker that follows Jiwon throughout the beginning half of the story, even so far as tailing her on her morning commute to work. And it actually made for a really interesting, small car chase scene that really didn't have a place in the story at all when you weigh it against what the whole entire story is, but it's there. But then something happens to the stalker as well, but afterwards Jiwon just doesn't go back to it. She doesn't acknowledge it. It's just like, okay, it happened, let's just continue with the story. And it just is like, why did this happen? Was it really necessary? I guess I understand that they needed something to get the story rolling, but it just felt like a waste to just dump it off like that and not really use it in the remainder of the story. But what happens to a lot of these supporting characters really held no weight with the remainder of the story or for Jiwon's character, and it just felt really awkward. Speaking of awkward, I had many issues with the editing and also the transitions between each scene. It just didn't really flow well together. It would just seemingly jump from one position to the next without really any kind of smooth way of letting you know, okay, we're going into the scene. It was just kind of, they just jumped from scene to scene really awkwardly, and it just didn't flow well together. And with regards to editing, a lot of the story relied heavily on flashbacks. And flashbacks are important because they let you know, especially in a horror movie, they let you know why something is happening, that is frightening the characters of today. You kind of need to know the backstory. However, I felt that Phone was really over-reliant on the flashbacks to the point where it would disrupt the flow of what's happening currently. Like, it could be a really intense scene, something really intense is happening, and then suddenly we dive into this 20-minute backstory, and then when we come back to present times, you kind of forget what was happening. It's like, oh yeah, I forgot there's this other story. Like, they could have cut the flashback scenes to much shorter time length in order to not disrupt the flow as much, or even refer to what happened in the past throughout the scenes that happened in the present time. You didn't really need to dive all the way into the flashbacks as much as Phone did. Not only did the story depend a lot on flashbacks, it depended a lot on coincidence in order to happen. Like, even the premise, the way the ghost in this story is attacking people, and how the curse ended up in Jiwon's hands, and somehow she discovers that this curse is connected to the people around her. And if you take a step back and think about it, it's like, how did this act of coincidence happen? It's just it felt really convenient. Like, supposedly before Jiwon had inherited that new phone number, there were two other people who got the phone number, and those two people, one of which you see in the first 5 or 10 minutes of the movie, they died because of mysterious occurrences. It just seemed really convenient for the story for Jiwon to inherit that phone, and magically she's connected to the reason why that curse came to be. And the more I thought about it, Jiwon, she was just kind of a dull character. She didn't really go through any character growth, and I just felt that I really didn't get any emotional attachment to this lead character for any other reason other than the fact that it's Jiwon. One other thing that I don't think I should count up as a negative, but I just couldn't help it, is the overacting by the young girl Youngju. I understand that at the time she was very young, maybe really early in elementary school, but when you take her weird facial expressions, like I mean, are we watching a horror movie or are we watching a comedy show? I don't know. I'm sorry to give this little girl the same kind of standards as I would a regular actor, but I don't know. You watch it and you just can't help but laugh. There's a lot more negative things to say about it, but I'll try to keep it as general as possible. So overall, Phone, it definitely feels outdated and formulaic to every other Asian horror movie, especially the ones that were released at the time. You have a vengeful female spirit. You had a cursed item. In The Ring's case, it was the phone call and the videotape. In The Grudge, it was the house. In this movie, it's the phone number. But anyway, when everything comes and ties up at the end, it just felt really recycled. I mean, to sum up the story of Phone, you just essentially mix The Ring and the old American horror movie What Lies Beneath, and you mix those two stories together and you have Phone. So did it live up to my nostalgia? No, not at all. Do I recommend this movie? Not really, unless you're like me and you go out of your way to watch bad horror movies. But yeah, anyways everyone, those are my thoughts on Phone. What did you guys think? Or what kind of questions did you guys have? Let us know in the comments below. And as always everyone, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to Asian Filmist to join in more discussions on Asian films, and you can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter. You can even follow me on Twitter at RayMaru555 if you want to talk more about movies. And thanks again guys, and I hope to see you all again in the next video. Take it easy.